morning. My name is Nancy Collegian. I'm the chairman of the National Association for Armenian Studies and Research. And on behalf of the Armenian Assembly and NAASR, it is my pleasure to welcome you here tonight. In particular, I would like to thank Gail O'Reilly, who through her generosity graciously offered to help support tonight's event with NAASR. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the First Armenian Church for accommodating us on such very short notice. When we started to hear how many people were planning to attend tonight's panel discussion on Egoyan's film Ararat, we realized that we would be wise in moving the event to a larger auditorium. So I think, as we can see here, we have quite a few people, and I think it was a very good move. Fortunately, you only had to move across the street, and thankfully the weather held out. So it's wonderful to see all of you here this evening. Tonight's panel boasts six very distinguished individuals who look forward to sharing their thoughts, perspectives, and critiques on a much discussed and controversial film on the denial of the Armenian Genocide. Marc, the director of publications at NAASR, and the author of a very insightful commentary on Ararat, which recently appeared in the Mirror Spectator, will moderate tonight's panel discussion and introduce the panelists to you. We are grateful to all of them for agreeing to participate in tonight's event, especially in the midst of very busy holidays. Thank you. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the unbridled efforts of Paul Boghosian for making tonight's panel discussion a reality. Ever since the film came out, Paul has worked tirelessly in bringing our attention to Egoyan's film. He interviewed Egoyan and his wife Setrakian in Washington, D.C., and wrote a very fine article on the film and these two very artistically gifted people. He has spent countless hours on the phone with Miramax in an attempt to bring them to Boston. Unfortunately, Paul's hopes were not realized, but he persevered and managed to arrange an interview via satellite of Egoyan and Kanjan on NPR, The Connection, which was just about a couple of days ago. So we're very grateful. Stay tuned. Stay tuned, though, with Paul's drive and perseverance. Who knows, maybe Adam and Arsene will come to Boston. Before I ask Marc to the podium, I would like you to know that at the conclusion of tonight's panel discussion, you are all invited across the street to the NAASR headquarters for refreshments. We also want you to know that the bookstore will be open, and we are offering a special 20% discount to members and a 10% discount to non-members on purchases of books made this evening only. Take advantage of this offer and complete some of your Christmas shopping tonight. Several new titles are available and on display, so please make a point to join us across the street. Thank you for your patience, and now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Marc Mamigonian to you. Thank you all for coming.
Good evening. I would like to introduce this very interesting and diverse and well-qualified panel. From left to right. Professor James Russell is Mashtots Professor of Armenian Studies at Harvard and a committed advocate for the cause of the Armenian Genocide recognition, among many other things. Sharon Rivo is the co-founder and executive director of the National Center for Jewish Film at Brandeis University. And in addition, she teaches courses at Brandeis on film and the Holocaust. Wesley Morris is a film critic for the Boston Globe, whose review of Ararat appeared last month. And he has previously worked as critic for the San Francisco Chronicle and the San Francisco Examiner. Paul Boghosian, who's already been partially introduced, is an independent film and television producer whose Boston-based company Harborside Films has produced dozens of programs for PBS, cable TV, and private clients. Lara Setrakian is the president of the Harvard Armenian Society, and she has spearheaded the highly successful April 24th genocide commemoration programs at Harvard for the past 2 years, and doubtless in the forthcoming year as well. And at the end is Alexis, who is an independent film producer whose credits include the critically acclaimed recent releases Tadpole and Personal Velocity, which you can see in theaters near you, and which was recently the subject of a feature by Wesley Morris in the Boston Globe. And she was recently named one of Variety magazine's 10 producers to watch. So here's your opportunity to watch her. Couple words about how this evening is going to be run. I'm going to present a series of question/discussion topics to the panelists, collectively and or individually. We'll see how that goes. I will turn it over to the panelists themselves to bring up any additional points they wish to discuss. And then we will move to audience question and answer. And for the audience Q&A, in the interest of everyone hearing what's going on, we're going to ask you to trek over to the far side there where that microphone is and speak your questions into the microphone. And please, let it be a question. And in the interests of our getting out of here before the weekend, a fairly brief question. I know it's difficult and it's not a rule I'm going to adhere to, but we'll all try our best. And please, one follow-up per question.
Would it be possible somehow to see the people at the panel?
To see them.
I got my vote.
I'll face that way instead of this.
All right. Okay, I'll take it there.
Okay, well, I'm going to stay right here because I'm afraid of heights. So, where were we? Okay, the format has been explained. So, let me ask a question before of everyone here before I ask a question of the panelists. How many of you have seen the film Ararat? How many of you have not seen the film? And it's okay, we aren't going to make you leave. More than once? Okay. All right, well that's good. That doesn't really prove anything, but at least now we know where we stand. Okay, then, the first question I would like to ask of the panel is sort of a very simple question which may not be simple to answer. But a gentleman emailed me all the way from England with this question, and I thought I should ask it. In 50 words or less, and I will be counting, how would you describe Ararat to someone who has not seen the film yet? And since we're a left to right culture, we'll start with Professor Ross. And please use the microphone.
What? Do you mean just one defining event or a variety of impressions?
I haven't seen the movie. Tell me what it's about, please.
The movie is about the denial of the Armenian Genocide and the psychological effects of the phenomenon of denial in society, but particularly in human relationships and human psychology.
It's the first mainstream English language feature film that deals with both the historical events and the ramifications of it for contemporary society of the Armenian Genocide.
I was on the way over here tonight. My friend Charles, who came with me, who has not seen the film, wanted to know, can you hear me? Are these?
Yeah, they
are on. So I was trying to explain to Charles what the film was about, and can you hear me now? Yes. And I guess I'm not very good at succinct descriptions of pretty much anything, and I know that it's probably ironic. But I mean, I would say that it's an Egoyan film that sort of is typical of all his films, and they're really complicated and intellectual exercises in trying to understand some traumatic event. This one happens to be something extremely personal to him, involving the Armenian Genocide, and not so much whether or not it happened, but how one documents it and brings that truth to a larger, hopefully mainstream audience in the conflict, whether that's possible or not. I know it's more than 50 words, but this is a more than 50-word movie. So.
This is not a film that a tagline can go quickly against, or a 30-second commercial, or a 30-second pitch. But I would say, you all hear me? No. You hear me now? Yes. Now? Yes. I would say that if I was to put this in stark, dramatic terms and take away the sort of an academic, distant, objective approach to what this film is about, I would say it's how a cataclysmic event can affect a civilization when that event is covered up and through lies and duplicity down to the current contemporary terms of how a family is defining itself and trying to identify who they are, where they've come from, why they're thinking this way in a fast-paced, multicultural, assimilated society.
I would say that the film is about the emotional and psychological burdens and blessings that we inherit from history, and how we face those charges. When I say charges, I mean how we deal with the responsibilities we're given by time and by circumstance that we're born into, and how we share that and reflect that in the way we go about in a world that isn't necessarily congruous with the world that I would say that right, that it's about what history charges us with, what it tells us to defend, and where we are to find meaning, and share that meaning with people, even when the world that we're sharing it with isn't necessarily congruous with the one that produced the thing that we are to carry with us through time.
Well, I think they summed it up pretty well, but I would say that the movie is about a young man's quest to understand why his father would risk his life for a cause. And in trying to understand what this cause is, he becomes entangled in the weight of history, of one culture's denial about the relevant facts, and he learns that this love and commitment is really what is at the core of his culture, his family, and I guess the world.
Thank you. We won't go in that order all the time so that you won't have to always be the last person. The next question I would also like to throw out to anyone who would like to answer. Do you think that Egoyan has made a film that will connect with a non-Armenian audience, an audience to whom the names Arshil Gorky, Clarence Usher, Van, Akhtamar don't mean anything particularly? And will it kindle their interest in the Armenian Genocide and in Armenian issues in general? Anyone, please.
I'll start with that. I saw the film with two non-Armenians, and I think their reaction is not atypical. On two separate appearances, I saw the film. The first time I saw the film, I saw it with a friend who's very much into mainstream, action-oriented Hollywood, James Bond type of films, as most of us are, actually. And he found it difficult to develop an emotional connection with the characters because he knew little about Armenian history, what I tried to force-feed him on an occasional basis. And he found it difficult to develop an emotional sense of who the characters are, because as soon as he was watching a character on the screen, it would cut to another character, another set of adventures. And the to and fro during the various time periods was very confusing for him to follow. However, the combination combination of the Armenian music drew him into the film, and also the whole Achille Gorky character and the relationship between the mother and the son resonated very strongly with him. And by the end of the film, he was enthralled. But he stayed with the film. He paid attention to the film. I took him to the film. I don't think it's a film that he would have gone to on his own. I don't think he would have exercised his own initiative in doing that if he went to the multiplex and he saw a James Bond film, and he saw several other types of film, and Ararat. He would say, what is that about? The second person that I saw the film with was more intellectually oriented, very much into European art films, and the type of person that you would see going to the Kendall Square Cinema or the West Newton. And she was very much taken with this, and she stayed with the film, and she had seen other Egoyan films. So I think it has to do a lot with your mindset going in. But to go back to your question, I think it's a difficult film for mainstream American audiences to connect with.
I've seen the movie thrice now in theaters, and 2 of the times were with the Harvard Armenian Society. We took around 190 students, non-Armenian mostly, to see the film. So I've kind of watched 3 sets. I've watched 3 sets of non-Armenian audiences respond to this movie, and I think their response has been overwhelmingly positive. I've had so many people tell me they're going to see it again, they're going to take people to see it, and in terms of what Egoyan intentionally or unintentionally did to let this resonate or communicate with the non-Armenian audience, I'd say that he hit it right on the mark, at least with people of my generation. Anyone I spoke to, age 28 or younger, who saw it, connected to an incredible degree with the movie itself. I think partially because of the things that we see as negative aspects, strangely. There's been a lot of discussion about how the actual genocide footage, so-called footage in the movie, is very self-aware. It's removed. It's intentionally artificial, since it is set in a film within a film. And so I think that lessened the impact for those of us who have been primed to some of these stories, for whom we were watching these scenes, like, for example, the dance, which we've known about that we have implemented for so long. We are kind of primed for that. It makes a different impact on us than it makes on them, especially on they who have never heard of those events taking place. The sheer horror of what happened was enough to make an impact on people, such that the artificiality of it within that setting didn't at all diminish the impact that it had on those people. Also, I can say that, especially the friends I've spoken to of mine, a lot of them expressed what Rafi expressed in the film, which was that they're very suspicious of things that are meant to make them feel a certain way. We're a very ironic generation. The movie gained a lot of credibility and a lot of moral authority by kind of facing the denial issues head on, by not being a movie necessarily just about the genocide, but about incorporating a Turkish character saying things like, well, I can see how it's reasonable within history for this to happen. I'm not sure if your version is correct. And to have an Armenian character there to respond with a very cogent and very powerful response. Very honestly, that's something we've all dealt with our entire lives, the whole denial aspect. But we very rarely really give an answer, much less a 1-line or 30-second answer. And that's something this movie did give, which was Rafi responding in a 30 seconds or however long it took, with the facts that Armenians were citizens of Turkey, that we just deserved protection, that we were waiting for protection, that Turkey wasn't at war with Armenia. There was no reason to expect or justify that this sort of thing would happen within that context. So for them to hear those denial allegations and hear an Armenian confront them in a very strong way gave the movie a very strong sense of honesty and self-awareness, such that from there on in, the viewer, especially the young American viewer, could trust it and say, wow, they've realized that some people don't think this is true. They've come back with strong arguments saying why I should trust this side. They've convinced me, and now I can follow the story and watch that footage and feel it in a different way.
Anyone else on that point? And just in general, if you can speak right into the
Into
microphone.
the mic. Can you hear this?
Yeah.
I don't know how non-Armenians see the film. I thought I was non-Armenian when I went to see it. What I realized was that the reason I wasn't very affected immediately, but then the next day and the day after that would suddenly cry for no reason, is that the film brought up things I have to bury in order to go on from day to day, especially since it's Van. Van is the area where I do most of my research. Been there many times, and I deal with Van folklore. And when I was thinking about this symposium writing, my study, all four walls are full of the same books or periodicals or things that you saw lying around, parts burned or torn up, in the scenes of the destruction of Van. So the film, in that sense, was literally unbearable. What made it more unbearable was what happened afterwards, and this is the non-Armenian response. And this is where I am not as optimistic as Lara is, but she's young and I'm old, and that's why there is such a thing as youth. 2 days later, Marc called me to tell me that Atom was going to be interviewed on The Connection, so I tuned it in and listened with interest. I know him and Arsina, and they're very civilized, kind people, and they acquitted themselves very well. The final question on The Connection, on WBUR radio, was in fact a statement of the classic genocide denial. It could have been read from a government handout by a Turkish lady from Brooklyn. And just as the interviewer on The Connection asked Atom to respond to this total denial of the genocide, to the assertion, moreover, that he had made the film out of hatred and that the entire issue is one of Armenians hating. The radio station cut in, terminated the interview, and introduced a pitch that was during the fundraising period, in which one of the fundraisers said, and you see here, we show the Turkish side too. This, WBUR, shows there are two sides to every issue. That's what makes us such a civilized station to which you should give your money. And that was the point at which I felt something which I had tried not to feel through the movie, which is that the world somehow doesn't hear that there are four glass walls. You're sitting in the four glass walls and screaming. And no matter what you do, somehow they take it and turn it around and serve it back to you as the very denial that the film was intended to penetrate. Now, the interviewer from The Connection didn't mean to do this, self-evidently. I'm not even sure whether the producers or the radio station realized what a monumental obscenity they were committing. They probably didn't care very much. To them, there are two sides of every issue, and this is just another issue. Of course, if you were to say, yes, we would talk about the Holocaust. There are two sides to the Holocaust. You wouldn't have an SS veteran get up and then be complimented by BUR, or maybe a Cambodian follower of Pol Pot, or some Hutu with a machete who had killed 800 people in a Rwandan church. No, but somehow the Armenian case is different. And I just get the feeling that the message is not going to go out the way I hope it will. That it may not be heard as much, that Miramax won't push the film as much as it ought to be pushing it. But somehow there's denial and silence still, and it just stays that way. That was my
No, please, we need to hold the questions until the end.
Marc, I just wanted to say, you asked in the marketplace and what that really means. First of all, I think that there are universal themes in this film that should, by rights, resonate with any thinking, intelligent, feeling human being. So we can hope so. Will enough non-Armenians see this film? That's a very big question mark. This movie is in about 40 theaters across the country right now. It's made over $1 million, which all these things are major, major feats in and of themselves. However, what has to happen is that people need to continually go and see this film for theater owners to want to carry this film any longer than 1 or 2 weeks. So that's, I didn't want to get into my part of imploring the audience to take their friends, but I think that that's what's really important. Will these non-Armenians get the chance to see it? And we have to encourage that to happen.
Sure.
Just a brief observation. I went to see the film on Sunday night at the West Newton, and there were only about 6 people in the theater. But I understand that there was sufficient attendance during the week that it will be held over for at least another week. So that's good news. Whether or not it will resonate, I agree 100% with Alexis that it's very important that people get to the theater. I need to go back and see it a second time because much of the history is new to me, at least the visual history of it. The written history I knew. I'm not an expert in the area. The Armenian Genocide is something that historians know a little bit about, but not a lot about. And at least for me and for my daughter who went with me, we felt the film was really fantastic. That it has the potential to reach probably not a mainstream popular culture America, but it certainly has the potential to reach a literate, movie-going, and a young audience. I think that the Rafi role is just incredible, and that if Miramax somehow gets the win, that maybe this young man can be nominated. Because I thought his performance was absolutely, he's in quotes, the new discovery, if they play it that way. And get young people in on the contemporary story, and while they're there for the contemporary story and the performance of this young man, and then at that point, the depiction of the historical events that you all know so well can then begin to be seen by a larger population. At least for me, I found the cinematographic motifs and the way in which it was presented in the multi-layers, as well as the universal themes that you're all talking about and that you all know about. The richness of the film, from both a historical standpoint, from a character development, from the jigsaw puzzle, it's the labyrinth that then comes together of this incredibly gifted director to be, it's got a chance, whether or not it will make it in that way, but nevertheless, it will at least be there, it'll be on video, it'll be on TV, it'll be worldwide. So that the first is, yes, the box office in America, but it still has the potential on all of these other, image-producing mechanisms to reach large audiences as far as these other avenues. So.
Following up on that, I would direct this particularly maybe to the panelists with more industry knowledge. I read a quote from Harvey Weinstein, who was the head of Miramax, the distributor of the film. He told the LA Times that he felt it was time to tell the story. Having lost 8 relatives at Auschwitz, Weinstein related well to the subject, although he expects to lose money on the film. Quote, "I thought it was way too compelling to ignore," said Weinstein. In light of this, and in light of the largely, although not universally enthusiastic, critical response, why hasn't the film been getting a bigger push from Miramax? Why can't we turn on Leno and see Arsene Kanjan talking about why people should go see her movie?
When I was interviewing Arsene and Adam in Washington, following the advanced screening that was sponsored by Miramax and also the Armenian Assembly, the screening took place on October 8th, and I did an interview on October 9th, the following morning. And one of the concerns that I expressed is here we have a very prestigious screening in Washington in the Coolidge Auditorium, which is about 100 years old. And Miramax is the sponsor of the film. There are senators, there are members of Congress, members of their staff in attendance. It's a very prestigious audience composed of also members of the Washington Film Society. You would think that a man of Harvey Weinstein's ego, if not super ego, would want to be there. Or at least a senior representative of Miramax should be there to introduce Adam and Arsene to the audience. There was no one, not one person from Miramax. New York, there was a Miramax representative from their Washington distribution office, a functionary, but there were no senior executives from Miramax. So I asked Adam the following day if he was happy with the promotional support, the advertising support he was receiving from Miramax. And interestingly enough, he pulled out that quote that you just read and indicated to me that this is Harvey's personal commitment, and that Adam got turned down by members of the so-called Armenian film community, and that if Harvey did not step forward, the film would not have a distributor in the U.S. And I asked him, I said, well, why do you think Harvey came forward at that point? He said, well, because he's made money on my other films, and that there's a personal relationship between Harvey and Robert Lantos, who was the actual producer of the film and came up with the $11 million to produce the film. And he and Adam have worked together in the past. Let's look at Miramax's successes. Bridget Jones' Diary, The English Patient, Shakespeare in Love, Good Will Hunting, Reservoir Dogs, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Old Chocolat. 5 of those 7 films have been nominated for Academy Awards. All of those films had terrific individual performances. All the films had a certain uniqueness. They had a nice niche independent play about them that could be differentiated from Hollywood product. And all of them were very, very aggressively promoted by Miramax. And we saw the directors on the talk shows, we saw the stars on the talk shows and doing newspaper interviews and so forth. So take that as one part of the information flow. Miramax knows how to promote films. Harvey is very aggressive in having Miramax product positioned for Academy Awards. So the question is, why isn't Ararat in that category? Well, you could say that Ararat perhaps does not have the universality of some of these films. Perhaps it's not as explicable. It's more difficult to understand. Perhaps it doesn't cross into mainstream. But as Sharon mentioned, there are some excellent, excellent performances. There are hooks into this film. There are promotional hooks into this film that would attract young people. Aside from David Arpe giving a wonderful performance as Robbie, Christopher Plummer reaches into another generation, the Sound of Music generation. Remember him as the prince, or actually not the prince, but the Austrian captain, Austrian captain. Thank you.
Well, some people remember him as the prince.
Before she was born. But so what is it? What is this all about? So I've been trying to contact. In fact, I've been in contact with a number of executives at Miramax for the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, as it relates to trying to get Adam up here. Because when I spoke to Adam in Washington, the thought was that he would want to come up here, that the Armenian community could do something for him. We'd set up press media tours, etc., etc. So I was shut out by a lady named Hirame Kayabashi. Hiromi Kayabashi, who's their vice president of publicity. And the first time I called her, she said, I have no time to talk to you. She said, I'm not interested in reaching into the Armenian community. I'm not really interested in doing anything in Boston right now. What I am interested in doing is arranging a charter flight for Leonardo DiCaprio, because we have to arrange a major tour in support of his appearance in Gangs of New York. And she subsequently said that Gangs of New York is costing Miramax over $100 million. Another film called Chicago, you probably heard about that, which stars Catherine Zeta-Jones, and that's right, is also another $100 million film. So the emphasis within Miramax during the month of December is to promote those films and the stars in those films. And Ararat is a nice little film, but they're not going to be promoting it, so forget about it. So I kept going back and forth to Adam's office and saying, this is what we can do in the Boston area. And so I got a call from them. I got a call from Hirabe's office about a week or two later. And the secretary said, well, you might have shamed Miramax into trying to do something in Boston because Adam said that he would like to do something here, so put together a tour. So we put together a day-and-a-half tour that was going to involve Lara, involve the Harvard Film Archives, and it was going to involve the Boston Globe and so forth. Came back to Miramax, and she said, it's not enough. We want to do more than The Connection. We want to do more than the Ozone and Blue radio show. We want to do more than David Brudmoy. And that's all nonsense. That's all nonsense. So one of the things I did is I looked into the archives of Harvey Weinstein, and he's a publicity hound. And there are pictures. Now, this is all speculation. This is all a little bit of paranoia. But there are pictures of him with Ahmet Ertegun. And Ahmet Ertegun...
Finally, some good paranoia talk.
Good paranoia talk. Ahmet Ertegun is the president of Atlantic Records. He's head of the Turkish-American Friendship Society. And he's been a close friend of Weinstein over the years. You've seen him at Oscar parties with one another, and Emmy parties, and so forth. Now, you take that as a set of facts, and then you take the fact that the Turkish lobby has been very, very quiet. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
That during the Cannes Film Festival, they were confronting the film very aggressively. They confronted the film when up in Toronto, at the Toronto Film Festival, the early part of September. The PR firm that they were employing at the time in Canada was putting out counter releases, talking about the falsehoods, etc. But the last 2 months they've been very quiet. So what does this mean? I don't know what it means. But it seems that they're letting the film play out. Perhaps they're letting the special relationship with Harvey and his other friends play out. But the truth of the matter is that there are many promotable items of this film, and the film is not being promoted. So maybe this is the subject of a Steve Kirkjian spotlight survey down the road. I don't know. That's my feeling about it.
Anyone else on this point? Yeah. Alexis?
You know, it's funny, I never thought I'd actually be in a position to sit here and defend Miramax, but I have to give all of us a little reality check. First of all, it's monumental, and we should all be very thankful to Harvey Weinstein for being the gambler and the big brash guy that he is, and taking on this film and putting it in theaters and starting discourse, dialogue, conspiracy theories, whatever else. We should be really, really thankful that we are in American theaters across the country and hopefully internationally. Second to that, you know, it's business. It's all about business. This is a small film. Paul, you mentioned those films, and I don't, you know, I'm not trying to, but I will. I mean, most of those films have movie stars in them. They're small films, but they all have movie stars in them. Right now, Miramax has 6 films that have Academy Award contenders. Gangs of New York, an epic, huge Martin Scorsese film with Daniel Day-Lewis, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Cameron Diaz. Already we're being, you know, shadowed, right? We're already disappearing out there in the marketplace. Second to that, they have Chicago, which they've been waiting for, you know, waiting to have done for, you know, however long, since the Broadway success with Catherine Zeta-Jones and Renee Zellweger. Frida, they have their plate full. This is no excuse, but this is just the reality. What I hear here, and what I love about our people, is that we have so much heart, and we have so much energy, and we want so badly to do what we can. I love that you call Miramax every day. I can tell you a little story about my little movie, which is called, you know, it's jarring, it's ballsy, go out, go do it. You want to do something, you're dying to do something. What can you do? Keep doing this grassroots publicity, get people in those theaters, My Big Fat Stupid Greek Wedding, which is more, you know, moronic, but it's made $200 million. Get that kind of groundswell, and then you will have the attention. I want to just tell you my little story, just so you can get a sense of the insanity of the business. We made a little movie for $300,000. It's called Tadpole. It was made on digital video. We played it at Sundance this past January. We sold it to Miramax for $5 million. That's a home run. We were very excited. What happened in those next 6 months was a period of tweaking that film and adjusting it to Harvey's likes and dislikes. I will not comment on that because he is a man with some vision, however difficult that time period was. Cut to the marketing and publicity for that film. Miramax has the most phenomenal publicity machine, period. Amazing. They're doing it. They're out there. We should, again, you know, put them on our Christmas thank you list. Second to that, their marketing. What did they do with my little movie? They marketed it as a very broad, generic comedy, which it was not. What happened to my little movie? It made about I hate to say that because my directing partner would be like, it's not your movie. It's his movie. But that movie made just under $3 million, and Harvey was quote unquote mystified. It didn't work. People didn't go. It got sort of squashed out there in the marketplace. That was a really, really hard pill to swallow. You know, yes, we had word of mouth. Yes, we had great publicity. Yes, we had Sigourney Weaver and B.B. Newirth doing press. Yes, we had a young actor, first-time film actor, who did a tremendous job. But that's the reality. The news today is, which is kind of interesting, that Miramax is re-releasing that film in about 12 cities and pushing B.B. Newirth for a Best Supporting Actor nomination, which is very exciting, but I don't want to get my hopes up because I don't want to say cynical, but I am very, very realistic about what goes on in this business. Anyway, I think that covers it.
I feel like this is point counterpoint.
Go, baby.
All of Alexis' points are very valid. However, I must say that Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which was a tremendous sensation when it came out 12 or 13 years ago, nobody knew who the director was. Steve Soderbergh, he's now very big today, and he was promoted. James Spader, nobody knew who he was, and that was a film that cost, I think, less than $2 million at the time. Reservoir Dogs, very violent film, had a couple of names to it, vastly broad. Good Will Hunting, you've all heard of that, nominated for Academy Award. Nobody knew who Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were.
What were the box
They were
offices on those?
they were considered to be very attractive performers, and therefore they were pushed, and there was a tremendous publicity machine behind them. The point is not that we're asking Miramax to put together enormous amounts of money. What we're asking them to do is use the assets of the Armenian community, whether it be in Detroit, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Boston, Washington, wherever, and use a guerrilla grassroots campaign in support of these people. So we're not asking them to put mega millions into the marketing of this film as they would into Chicago. What we're asking them is to reach out. When I talked to the Miramax people, they said the Armenian Assembly, what is that? And I explained all this to them, and I said, how can you lay out a marketing plan for a film and not know where the strength of the Armenian community is, the Armenian population base? And we're not just reaching into the Armenian community. You must know that we're one of the most successful, prosperous, high net worth communities in the United States, and we have tentacles everywhere. So reach out and take a guerrilla marketing approach and give us an opportunity to show what we can do. I talked to the Miramax person here. She hadn't even seen the film. And I said, what is this film about? She said, it's about a lot of people killing each other. This is how Miramax. And then they're wondering why they were shut out. I talked to the Miramax person in Detroit, talked to the Miramax people in San Francisco. There was a lack of central distribution of information. So I'm disappointed in what Miramax has done thus far.
I'm going to reach out my tentacles and go to another question. I'd like to direct this one to Wesley Morris, because I think this is a point that he touched on in his review. In the movie Ararat, Egoyan seems to wrestle with whether or not a commercial film is an adequate or even a proper medium for dealing with such a weighty subject as a genocide. Do you think it is, and what are the risks that come with such a treatment?
I don't know. I mean, it's a. Can you hear me? I mean, I just first of all would like to clarify something. I mean, for me, before I even speak, because apparently the review's out there and you've all read it because it's in the little packet that you got. But I mean, I really sort of mixed feelings about the film, not as a work of, you know, personal polemic, but just as a work of art. And I think that one of the things that I really admire about this movie is that it's not exclusively about, it's not straightforwardly about the genocide. It's about how you convey history to a mass audience and how you memorialize an event, a factual event, in a fictive context. And the complications and the contradictions and the sort of the paradoxes of doing that and accomplishing it. Genocide and Holocaust and death and slaughter and evil throughout history is something that cinema has sort of gravitated to, both because it looks good on screen. It's horrible to say, but I mean, with some directors, it's sort of aestheticized to the point where it takes on an aesthetic dimension that it didn't have when it happened. In the recreation, it achieves this. And this is something I think that Ararat is very much bewildered by and challenged by. I don't really know if cinema is really the ideal place to work out the issue of genocide. But I think it's a way to sort of memorialize and make real history. If you think of photography as a way to convey a haunting image that you won't forget, I mean, it's a way to, it's an index for you to remember something by. And conversely, if you marry that to the idea of a narrative or a storytelling device, which sort of allows you to understand something in the way that happened, then the motion picture, I guess, would be the best vehicle to convey anything, because it does both those things at the same time. And so in that, sure, I mean, movies are great to a certain extent, but I mean, one of the problems with that, and it's raised in film, is that you run into a whole other series of problems in terms of who you're trying to reach and why you're trying to reach them, and how you've chosen to repackage history to entertain. And the film, foremost, at least in a mass market sense, is a vehicle for entertainment. And to certain rules you have to follow. And this film is very much concerned with how you follow those rules and still remain true to history. And that's completely admirable.
I'd like to ask Sharon Rivo a question as well. Is there an analogous film in the Jewish experience that was so eagerly anticipated and upon which so much hope was pinned?
Well, that's a tough one. Well, first of all, let me say that there are major differences in the Jewish Holocaust and the presentation of it. We've cataloged over 400 films that deal with the Holocaust. And so you have to ask yourself, why is there this huge mass of both documentary and fiction feature films that deal with the events between 1939 and 45 that happened to the Jewish people? And why are there so few materials that deal with the Armenian Genocide? And I think that there's a couple of major points. I won't go into a long analysis, but first of all, the Armenian Genocide was not photographed in the same way by the Turks, by the perpetrators, that the Germans did. The Germans were proud of what they were doing in the ghettos. The Don DeLillo and White Knights has a little thing that he says, you know, gee, if it wasn't for Hitler on TV, what would we watch? Turn on your TV and you will see almost every night marching Nazis and or some of the footage that the Nazis themselves took in the documentation of both the rise and of the subjugation of the people. In addition to that, you now have, I mean, just this year, you've got major fiction feature films. Scola, the Italian director, Unfair Competition. The Pianist, Roman Polanski. Szabo, the Hungarian director, has made a new film called Taking Sides. These are 3 world-class directors that are dealing with fiction feature films just in the year 2001, 2002. And the list goes on and on and on. We all know Schindler's List and Shop on Main Street, and you know. So there's a quantity, but you also have to realize that Jews lived in many countries. And those countries that were the perpetrators have now, almost all of them, recognized what they have done, which is not true about the Turks. And the Germans and the Czechs and the Lithuanians and the Poles, everybody's making films, those filmmakers, as well as the Jews. So you have, you know, a totally different situation. And you also have events that happened 1915 versus generation later. So there's all kinds of factors, I think, that play into this. And that, you know, the anticipation, yes, probably the Schindler's List. Because American and Spielberg and Universal, and here he was making it with his own money, which is important, by the way. This is back to the business end of it. Many Jewish directors, producers are now in Hollywood sufficiently well-heeled. How do you want to say it? They've got power. Spielberg guaranteed the funds to Universal and the making of Schindler's List, which is was an enormous budget, and so he had the power to do this. Barry Levinson, I don't know if you saw Liberty Heights, who made Reservoir Dogs, okay, and Homicide, not Reservoir Dogs, Homicide, and the other. There was another. He had a big blockbuster. Made enough money so that he then made a little film that he wanted to. Yeah, but Avalon didn't make a lot of money. He made Wag the Dog, I'm sorry, thank you. So he had enough money on his own to then make a film that he wanted to do about anti-Semitism in the 50s in Baltimore that was not going to be a money-making film. So those are, I think, are just some of the factors of the differences in the proliferation and the creation of some of these materials.
Two small points, not to contradict anything. You said it all, actually. We all know, anyone who's conversant with Armenian affairs knows, that there was going to be a film of the 40 Days of Musadah in 1935. MGM was going to make it. The State Department put pressure on them at the instance of the Turkish government not to do so, and they acceded. We all know this because the documents are there. The reason that there aren't films about the Armenian Genocide, the way there are films about the Holocaust, is that Germany lost World War II, and Turkey pretty much fought World War I to a draw, and has been able to exert pressure on the rest of the world not to make movies or otherwise recognize an event which would call into question fundamentals of the legitimacy of the present-day republic, which has to bear moral responsibility for what happened. If you want to get some idea of what that would be like, in the Jewish case, there's a novel called Fatherland by a guy named Richard Harris, an English journalist. It's a speculative, futuristic novel about what would have happened had World War II been fought to a draw. And the focus of the novel is Germany's effective diplomatic denial of the Holocaust and America's agreement with that denial, and the complete lack of documentation The Armenian Holocaust is abundantly documented. There are photographs. There are loads of photographs. It doesn't matter. Just one more point. There was a very good movie on the Armenian Genocide. It was produced in Armenia because in Armenia, Armenians had the freedom to say what they wanted about themselves and the power to make a film. Within limits, because this was in the Soviet period, Armen Film made a movie, maybe most of you remember it. It's a great movie, I think, called Nahaben. Did anyone see it? You can get it from Setrakian Videos in California. I probably can get it around here too. That's where I got my copy. It's in Armenian, which is a drawback if you're trying to talk to Odars, but otherwise it's an excellent film. Curiously enough, it also deals with Van, with the Van experience, probably because most Yerevansis, or many Yerevansis, are survivors specifically from Van. I think it's an extremely moving film and good to see, and maybe it could be subtitled or something. It's certainly worth seeing. That's small.
I'd like to throw a question at Lara. It's a speculative question, so it can get a speculative answer. Imagine yourself as a Turk raised on genocide denial. What effect does this film have on you? Or alternately, as a Turk who's largely unaware of what happened in 1915, as many are. What does this movie do for or to you?
I'm sad to say that, imagining myself in that position, I would not be personally moved or convinced necessarily by watching this film. Because when you're prepared, first of all, to dismiss allegations, graphic scenes, and kind of the emotional, sympathetic, blood and guts aspect doesn't reach you the same way, I imagine. And also, the nature of the only Turkish character in the movie, Ali, leaves a lot to prompt defensiveness on the part of a Turkish person watching the movie.
How so?
I had no, I mean, I loved the movie. I just did, and I think the character was fine. I mean, I had no problems with the specifics of Ali's character, but if I were a Turk and saw that the only character there was the center of the the homosexual and homophobic aspects of the film, I would probably get defensive, given the, given the fact that not just that, but also the demonization of Turks that takes place through his character when he's playing the scenes of Cevdet Bey, don't shed much of a sympathetic light to his character. There's really nothing in the film that makes him a sympathetic character at all, even when he's just, Joe Schmo guy accepting a bottle of champagne on behalf of the director. So I can't imagine that watching this film as a Turkish person of my age, that you would really find reason to build a bridge with the Armenian case for genocide. And that is an unfortunate consequence of the movie that we don't have to, that will have repercussions, I think. I mean, I don't know how much of the Turkish community has come out to see the film and how much we'll hear from them on those particular notes, but I just don't see the bridge. I don't see the bridge that might have been able to exist had it been this is what happened. We acknowledge and we lament, and we, in the form of Charles Aznavour, feel a collective pain over feeling so hated then and so hated now, but at the same time, we want to put that away. We don't want to be hated anymore. We don't want to hate anymore. We just want these things to come to light. We just want our story told. And that was not one of the punchlines of the movie, so I don't see that impact taking place.
Wesley?
I was just going to say that in order for that to happen, I think the film would have to be propaganda in some way, in order to get people, in order to actually affect the kind of change that I think you'd be asking about to make. Not so much to make someone aware, but to actually sort of reverse their ideology in some way. And I don't really think the film is is sort of striving to function on that level at all either. So.
Let me ask James Russell and anyone else who would like to answer. Should, in a perfect world, and I think if you know Egoyan, you know he wouldn't have done this, but should Egoyan have made a straightforward historical film about the genocide and not one that is either enhanced or cluttered, depending on your take, with all these other emotional, intellectual exercises? And psychosexual incidents.
I won't talk about the psychosexual part right now, but I will talk about the sort of film he should have made, because it's an interesting story. I was invited to Toronto in April 1999 to give a lecture on the genocide for the commemoration of April 24th by a group of organizations consisting of the AGBU, the ARF, and a few others. And they had asked me, what do you want to do in Toronto? I said, I'd like to meet Egoyan. And they organized this. So I got to Toronto airport. They asked me what the purpose of my visit, and I said a lecture. Oh, are you going to be reimbursed for it? Yeah. In that case, you have to have a one-day work visa. Okay? So they sent me to a back room. For those of you who've seen the film, it's kind of interesting. I wasn't carrying any dope, okay? But for the record, in case anyone from Harvard is here or something. Anyway, so I go into a back room, and there's a guy who says, what do you need a visa for? I said, I'm giving a lecture. About what? About the Armenian Genocide. He says, what's that? I said, yeah. Well, I told him what it was, okay? So you don't have to be here until the weekend. And after half an hour, he says, so why are you coming to Canada to do it? I said, because Canada just gave out. So he says to me, yeah, you know, governments are a bunch of hypocritical bastards. He stamps my passport. We exchange addresses because he and his fiancée were going to come to Boston on holiday. So I go see Egoyan. And at this point, the Dashnoks lock us in a room. They're very good at this kind of thing, you know, where no one goes in, no one goes out, except someone bringing us coffee. And I make my pitch. You have to make this movie. You have to make a movie about the Armenian Genocide. He says, it's not my thing. You know the kind of movies I make. They're dubious, they explore complicated issues and so on. I said, do it any way you want to do it. Do it your way, but just do it. Why me? I told him, why him? I said, when my tribe founded a state in the Middle East, they needed money from the American Jews. So they told Golda Meir, go and get $5 million. She didn't say, it's not my job description. She got on a plane, went to New York in December without a winter coat, didn't manage to find time to borrow one till she'd been here 2 weeks, and raised $50 million. I said, this is what we need. I said, you're what we've got. You're the one who has to do it. It's not why me, it's how can I help? So about at this point, yeah, he's really psyched. The Dashnoks come back in. Did you convince him? He said, I think so. So anyway, but that was the extent of my involvement in the film, except that when, wait, so when I went home, his son's name is Arshiel. His son's name is Arshiel. So I had been to Khorgum, Arshiel Gorky's village on Lake Van. It's near Van. Two summers before, and I had some snapshots of Khorgum. So I sent them to Atom and Arsina. I said, these are pictures of Khorgum. They're for your son. I hope you remember our discussion. You know. So I think he made the film his way. Artists have to be allowed to be artists. You know? And art always has to involve pushing the boundaries of something. It's not conformist. It's not propagandistic. Yeah? It has to make you uneasy. It has to make you think. And in this respect, I think that Egoyan has done a very good job. The only kind of job he could have done, honestly, being himself. And that's what we have. I agree with everyone else on the panel who said that this is a film, therefore, that we have to promote and talk about and go to watch again and again. And not carp at him for not having made a propagandistic epic, but appreciate the profundity of his own spiritual life, his own intellectual horizons that have gone into the film.
I think 2 points that I'd like to make at this point. One is that the support for this film has come from a Hungarian Jew, Robert Lantos, who made a film 2 years ago with Ralph Fiennes called Sunflower, which is a multi-generational, Sunshine. It's actually quite a good film, a long film, about a 3-hour film. And essentially about a Hungarian Jewish family through the generations, starting at probably the beginning of last century, the 1900s, and continuing on. And Lantos had a great sense of relief when he finished that film because he felt that was a film of his family, of his generation. And he had a long-term relationship with Egoyan, and he said that I have a relationship now with Atlantis, is it Alliance Atlantis? Alliance Atlantis, in which I'm going to make 3 films under the contract that I have with them, and one of them I'd like to be a film that you would do about the Armenian Genocide. And he essentially provided the money, 17 million Canadian, $11 million American. So between Lantos and Harvey Weinstein, we have Ararat. It's a credit to both of these people. But the question, Marc, that you asked James about the film, I actually asked the question of Adam, and I have Adam's response if you would like to hear it. I'm going to put this up to the microphone, and you can hear what Adam Egoyan says and how he would answer this question. I hope this comes through.
You might want to
Can you hear it at all?
you might want to summarize.
Well, essentially, he was born in Egypt. He grew up in Victoria, British Columbia. And he grew up in a very Armenian household. His mother was a singer, his father was an artist, but they made a living by his father opening up a furniture store. So he heard the Armenian story over and over again, to the point, like a lot of teenagers, rebelled. And he said, enough is enough, etiquette, I don't want to hear any more. He ended up going to the University of Toronto. And while he was at the University of Toronto, there was an assassination attempt against a Turkish diplomat in Ottawa. In fact, the attempt worked. The Turkish diplomat was killed. This brought a lot of attention to the Armenians at the University of Toronto. And he found himself in a situation in which he had to defend his ethnic origins. What is it about the Armenians? How could you be killers, etc., etc.? So this provided him with the rationale, gave him the motivation to explore his own past, explore his own identity. And it was from that point that he realized he wanted to be a filmmaker. And went on from there. But the films that he saw growing up, which attempted the 40 Days of Musa Dug, which was done on a very small budget, and a Simon Berlin, and 2 or 3 other. He was embarrassed by them. He thought they were amateurishly put together, low budget, poorly acted, and so forth. And so he said, I'm not going to do a film like that. I have to do a film that represents my own personal vision. And he said he came to a point when Lantos offered the money that he felt he was ready to put his own reputation, his own clout, his own leverage within the Canadian industry and the film industry on the line to do a film that he said he would do for his son and that he would do for his son's generation. So he started a draft, and he was thinking about who was going to see the film, and he tore that draft up. He started another draft and said, well, how are the Americans going to relate to this? How are the Europeans going to? He tore that up. And he said, I have to reach within myself and write a film that is my own personal vision, that, as he said, is part of my own pedigree, and that has the stamp of Adam Egoyan on it. And people who see Adam Egoyan films are expecting a certain type of film. And he said, that's the film I'm going to write. And so that's essentially what he said. He was very proud of what he did. And he said, perhaps he said the film is too dense. And perhaps I put in a subplot more than is needed. And perhaps I spent too much time talking about the art and music. And he felt that what the Turks did was not just destroy a people, but attempt to destroy a civilization. And he wanted people to know that the Armenians have a history beyond genocide, and that we stand for something that's important, and that we're a cultural people, and that we're an artistic people, and that we have a people that have always made a contribution to whatever society they're in. And what he tried to do is include some of those points in the film. And as he said, perhaps I did too much, but he said, I don't know when another Armenian filmmaker is going to have the clout that I have, and therefore I wanted to do the film that I felt I should do.
One or two more before we turn it over to you guys and to the audience. This is a long-winded question. One of Ararat's themes, and one of the themes of a lot of Egoyan's movies, is the unreliability and the subjectivity of memory. But much of what we know about the Armenian Genocide comes from the memories and the memoirs of survivors. And Egoyan has stated repeatedly that the facts of the Armenian Genocide are absolutely irrefutable. How do you reconcile those two seemingly or possibly contradictory positions? Or do I need to restate the question in a way that makes sense? If memory is unreliable, is he feeding denial by focusing on denial? Let's put it that way. And on the unreliability of human memory.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on how you define the unreliability of memory. I mean, the details might be a little fuzzy, but the absolutes are pretty absolute. I mean, I think that one of the things about this film is that it's not so much, I mean, the denial is sort of a matter of perspective, not so much memory. I mean, the people who, I mean, the Armenians know what happened. It's a side issue. It's sort of a, you know, I'm not really sure that the...
Let's take the Arsene Kanjan character. Her second husband, the mother of Rafi's stepsister, died. The father, rather, died. She tells the girl, I can't remember it the way you want me to remember it. Which seems to imply that if you wanted to, you could remember something differently if you tried hard enough. If a Turk, for example, inclined to denial goes into this movie and hears that, why not say, you simply remembering it wrong. You remember it differently than we do. It's just a matter of memory. Who knows really what happened?
Sorry.
No, I understand the question.
I was worried at first that facing denial would be denial. Primarily when a good Armenian friend pointed out to me that the fact that there was heroin in the canisters that Rafi was carrying proves that Rafi was believing something that he needed to believe, and that he was exonerated by Christopher Plummer for believing honestly in something that was heartfelt for him and critical for his personal existence, and for his purpose in bringing that baggage into Canada. But then I reconsidered, because that was really hard to reconcile for me. Is Egoyan suggesting that Rafi is capable of remembering things the wrong way? And if so, what does that say for the whole movie? What does that say for me? Am I capable of remembering things the wrong way? But then I realized, I think it was just the general point of the subjectivity. I think he is saying that memory is subjective and that you can't believe what you need to believe. So when looking for what we as observers, or even we Armenians who are challenged by Egoyan to question what we believe and why, that we end up turning to things like Clarence Usher, and that it does end up, it is in the document. I mean, it is in the document that we base our faith and things like that. Otherwise, it is memory and it's subjective. And I think that's why the paragraph on Usher and the factual basis of the movie that comes right after the final scene is so key. It's kind of a reminder that yes, memory is subjective, and we have to challenge ourselves when we believe things that we feel viscerally, but watch other people feel viscerally in the opposite direction. And that the only way we can justify that is through the testimony. And who knows? The people who were there, they knew. And for us, that means our ancestors and the people who told us the stories, but for non-Armenians who watch that kind of thing, it's all up to Clarence Usher, and he exonerates us rightfully in this movie.
Denial isn't, doesn't mean that you feel someone else's memories are false or intentionally mendacious. Denial means not accepting something that you know to be true. It seems to me that in the segment where Rafi is speaking to Christopher Plummer, forget the character's name, the customs officer, when the customs officer lets Rafi go and accepts on faith that Rafi is telling the truth when he says he didn't know what was in the film canisters, except what he was told, film. He's not speaking about heroin. He's speaking about the story that preceded it, about the narrative of the Armenian Genocide. That is where he makes a leap of faith. The heroine is just a way of doing the film, I think. It's part of the story. The main aspect of all of this is his question. And you remember how he explains to his son why he believed Rafi. He said, I was thinking of you. He's unable to believe his son. He's unable to accept that his son and Ali believe in God. The film, at the start of the film, we see this frosty confrontation. The only way to overcome denial is not more hatred. It's acceptance of the truth. Truth is a divine quantity. It's associated with love. That's why none of this has to do with hatred. This was my sense. But just one or two points on memory. As not about the film, but as an Armenologist. Every community that perished produced a memorial book, a Hushamadyan. The survivors, whether they went to the Middle East or America, all published memorial books. The Jews did the same thing in Europe on several different occasions after World War I and after World War II, and the genres are remarkably similar. These Armenian memorial books are voluminous, larger than telephone books, many of them. They contain lists and lists of names, addresses of houses, diagrams of villages, names of churches, exact descriptions of who was killed or fled or was driven away where and when. There are about 100 of them, I should think, in existence, possibly more. That's memory. It's memory in print. It's not invented. The people who wrote these things who were trying to make a living and rebuild their lives after this cataclysm had not all spoken to each other by some sort of spectral email that didn't even exist yet in order to create a common story, an alibi, it would have taken more ingenuity than humanity is capable of to create such an intricate fiction. This is why part of this movie also is about the uncontrollable rage that people feel when a truth so intricate and so intrinsic to you and so well documented and so well known, is denied in a way that demeans human intelligence and the capacity of humans to accept reason. That's part of what Rafi's rage is about, and that's what he's coming to terms with when he thinks about his lost father.
Just one quick point. Let's not confuse the questions that the director raises about memory and denial with what he has presented. He has presented a representation, a representing of the historical facts, and there's no question about that. Those sections of the film in which he recreates in color, in the film within the film, provide the historical facts to an audience, and there's no question about the validity of those. They are reinforced not only by the participants, by the doctor, by all of that. There are questions that he raises about, well, sometimes when you present these kinds of things in Hollywood style, that they can be misconstrued, or the whole question of representation. And he comes out flat with it, and he basically says, look, it's very difficult to present historical reality and facts on the big screen. And he's upfront about it. And that's one of, I think, the really strong things of this film. I don't know if you're aware of the work of Michael Verhoeven. He's a German filmmaker. He made Nasty Girl. He made a film called My Mother's Courage, which is based on George Tabori's mother's diary. And he does sort of the same thing. He lets the audience know immediately, this is a fiction feature film you're about to watch. But it's based on fact. And I think that's the strength of the film, is that it's based on fact. The other questions about memory and how it affects subsequent generations and the ultimate layers, but don't confuse that, because I don't think he confuses it. I think that's crystal clear to any audience that the history of the genocide and the brutality, which is extraordinarily well done. I mean, it's to the point that you want to leave the theater. When you see The Pianist, you will see a straightforward, linear film about a man in the Warsaw Ghetto during a specific period of time. Big production. It's just the story of this guy, beautifully photographed, beautifully done, raises other kinds of questions, but it's a different type of filmmaking. It's not this kind, and that was the beauty also of what you were saying about him as an artist, that he has done it in his own expression. So don't confuse, the two, the genre basically with the facts.
In the interest of time, why don't we go to the audience, and if the panelists have any points they would like to bring up, I'm sure they can be subtly worked into the answers. If you have a question, please head over to the microphone over there, present the question, and there will be an opportunity for a follow-up, but please,
Sorry.
Thank you.
I don't know if I can get him in there anyway. Where is he?
There's a switch on the mic.
He disappeared.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry, it's more of a statement than a question. I'm violating the first rule, but I think people will benefit.
Right into the microphone.
I think people will benefit. It's more of a statement than a question, but unfortunately I haven't seen the movie yet. I will, but I did hear the interview on WDR, and what you said about the interview was really disgusting.
let me just clarify that. It was a I was told by one of the producers of The Connection that it was a decision specifically of WBUR. It was not a decision of The Connection, and the show did go out intact to other stations. So if you have complaints, I would urge you to direct them not to The Connection, but to WBUR, and I would urge you to direct them to WBUR. Yes?
Immediately afterwards, we ascertained that the show is, what's the word, not syndicated? Syndicated. Yeah, for example, I've heard it on WNYC, and there are no WBUR interruptions. So presumably the same evening, it was heard in New York City without that interruption. And Marc heard it on the internet without the interruption, so he got to hear Atom's last word. What I found disturbing about it was the callousness of the interruption and the assertion by a very self-satisfied fundraiser that it's civilized to present this, what was advertised as another point of view. So but the main thing is what should be done about such cases. I don't know, I listen to WBUR all the time, and all the time I hear, this was brought to you partly by Arthur T. Gregorian, Oriental Rugs, a little part of Persia in Lower Falls. I mean, it's like a mantra. Yes? I probably heard it in my sleep by now. So I would strongly urge all of you who know Arthur T. Gregorian and other Armenians who contribute to WBUR to talk to them about getting in touch with the station director and at the very least securing some kind of assurance that this kind of thing won't happen again. Arthur T. Gregorian Incorporated, 2284 Washington Street, Newton Lower Falls. Coco Budakian and Sons, 1026 Main Street, Watertown. Sorry, Winchester. It's a Freudian slip. Fastaci. 203 Belmont Street, Belmont, Mass. Major advertisers. You know, like some people used to say in the 1930s, don't mourn, organize. Use your economic power and raise your voices. I will.
Next question, and I forgot to mention, if you could please identify yourself before you ask the question.
Hi, my name is Nancy Simmons, and I would like to address this question to Mr. Wesley Morris. Wesley, I called you yesterday and left a message. Hi. Well, the question is, you may not want to hear this, but I'm here because of you tonight.
Oh, good, because I hope by not calling you back, you actually came to ask me the question. Because I have an answer. And I was
Okay,
going to
well,
call.
let me ask the question for the audience. Okay. On December 1st, in the Globe, was your first review of the movie. And in it you stated, which I thought was very brave of you, you said, accurately, acutely intelligent, but trying, the new Egoyan film addresses the 1915 Armenian Genocide at the hands of the Turks. Further down the review you state, there's a movie about genocide in here. I said, good for you, bravo, the G word was said not once but twice. But unfortunately, to my amazement and disappointment, this past week in the Boston Globe, the same review was printed, but some changes had been made. Again, the same statement. Acutely intelligent, but trying, the new Egoyan film addresses the 1915 massacre. Further down the review, you state, there's a movie about the killings in here. My question to you is, why the change?
Let the man speak.
First of all, I had a couple of things to say about that. The first of which is I had no idea that until you called me yesterday, and until Marc called me today, I had no idea. I don't read the paper. But, I mean, I read the paper, but I mean, I don't read it to double check what I've written. I read it for the same reason everybody else does. Apparently, it's not for shock, apparently. Sorry, Nancy. But I was a little bewildered by that, only insofar as there's a huge difference between massacre and genocide. So I went and I asked around to find out what had happened. And it had been brought to my, well, I'll give you the long story because you deserve it. Basically, in the system they have with the globe, and it really isn't going to answer much of anything because I'm so low angry because I didn't say massacre. But the system at the globe basically works such that all the changes that are made to a story before it's put in the newspaper are trackable through the system. It's this very elaborate, very bizarre electronic thing where you can see all the changes that are made. And no one could find out, no one could see how the change had been made because both times the word appears, both uses of genocide appear in the capsule that's in the system. So that would apparently mean that the person who changed it, the person who's changing it on Sunday the 8th did it from what they call a proof, which is basically a printout of that, all the stuff that's on that page on an actual sheet of paper like this, and someone took a pen and manually circled it both times and replaced it. And the person at the copy desk basically had no, I mean, he pinpointed it to a specific person. I didn't know the person, but he had an idea who it may have been. And this is what I urge you to do. Because I didn't do it, I would never have done it. I understand the you know, shocking inappropriateness of the act. I mean, anybody who wants to have something done about this should just write the globe. I mean, really. I mean, I don't know what'll come of it, but I mean, that's the way those things get done. I mean, and for all the people who sort of wrote to me after they read my review and said I was a terrible person and that sort of thing, I mean, that's how that sort of thing gets done. And I would just say, and I mean, I've made it known around the newsroom that I'm pissed off, but I mean, it would mean a little more if other people outside, I mean, it's more effective if there are other people who aren't me.
But
Right.
the answer is, did you find out who did it and why?
Well, I mean,
That's what I want to find out, Wesley, is why it was done.
Right, sure. And I don't have a reason why. I don't know why. I mean, the person that the copy chief thought it may have been was not important that day. This is a night person who did
But
it.
nobody does that to any of the other reviews.
Oh,
and why
well-
single out that particular word? I think you should be very outraged because somebody.
Oh,
is
I'm really mad. I mean,
words.
when you called me yesterday, I was freaked out because I wasn't sure if I was being accused of something.
No,
And
Marc saved you from that because I was really hot under the collar. He saved you from that.
You're
so.
very nice on the phone, though. Brian.
Thank you. I didn't want to attack you on the phone because you may not have called me back, so that's why I was nice to begin with. And once I got
But seriously, I don't know the intent behind it. Obviously, it's a political choice. I mean, there's no other way around that. It's perfectly obvious to me. I know how to get in touch with both of you now. And, I'll get to the bottom of it. But again, I would just urge you to sort of write in and make, you know.
Can you bring the original, can you put the original review that you did so succinctly and so well done, and it's your, it's your review, can it not go back into the paper?
Oh no, it's easy to change.
Yeah.
It's just as easy to change back as it was to
Absolutely, that's all we're asking, is to just, your words.
Sure.
So
No,
if you want those words, it should go right
when
back.
you get your paper on Sunday, it'll be the way it originally was.
Yes, thank you.
Ben, could I offer a little bit more information and a further conspiracy theory as well? Professor Mamigonian just pointed out to me another incident. I don't know when this happened, but recently? Several years ago, where in an obituary of an Armenian genocide survivor, the wording was changed to omit a certain word. In the Globe, yes. And that the answer was that this was a Globe policy decision. And here's where I bring in my conspiracy theory, which is that the Globe is owned now by the New York Times. And for any of you who read the New York Times, you know the Times has this curious autocorrect in their system where anytime someone types the word genocide, it's replaced by massacre, or else the word alleged pops up in front of it. Why?
Why? Say it.
Well, because they are in the thrall of either the Turks, the State Department, or both. I don't know. But
More to that.
The thing is that it was an obituary of father, a very prominent person in Boston. And because the Globe struck out the word Armenian genocide, a group of very, what do I say, leaders of the community and in their own professions met with the Globe people. And it's during that discussion, the Globe said it's their policy, and I think before it was sold to the New York Times, it was their policy not to use the word Armenian genocide. And there are other different
Term Armenian genocide or genocide period?
Armenian genocide.
genocide, they would not use the word genocide.
so, anyway. No answers are forthcoming this evening, but next question.
Name is Van Royen, genocide.
Right into the mic.
Van Royen. We had denial, we had genocide, and there was a lot of symbolism in the movie. I wonder if any of you would interpret the sewing of the button back on Gorky's jacket by the actress who played the role. I think we need some relief, and you might find it in that symbol. Thank you.
Anyone?
I think it has to do with the mother's hands. Mother's hands. Yes? It's related to the what for me was the most powerful scene in the movie when Arshil Gorky was painting a portrait from the photograph that he had saved. In history, you know that his mother didn't die directly as a result. Well, she didn't die during the actual murders of the genocide. She died later. They escaped. They got as far as Yerevan, but Yerevan was full of refugees who were ravaged by typhoid and cholera. She died then. When he painted out her hands, let's look at several different things, because this is the point at which Egoyan uses very specific images out of Armenian tradition. A mother's hands, what do? They sew, they cook, they caress. They represent love. Towards the end of the film, we see a video clip made by Rafi in which he shows the bas-relief of the Mother of God and Christ at Achtamar on the Church of the Holy Cross. And as he shows this, and to me it was a shocking juxtaposition, he says he understood his father. His father. Different people have different feelings. I don't approve personally of the murder of diplomats because they're unarmed. I understand the rage he felt. I can identify with it myself, but the act is shocking. And to juxtapose it with a picture of the most exalted innocence, I think was intentionally shocking. And it was as though to say that one of the victims of Holocaust is the very idea of innocence, the very concept of love, the ability of one to feel, to love, that it becomes unbearable, and the hands get painted out. But then, afterwards, when this is over, then you think of the beginning of the film. Do you remember? There's a party going on, a lot of loud conversation, and Rafi is reading in Armenian the story about, and this is very Armenian, the evil girlfriend who is taking the beloved son away from his mother with whom he should live for the rest of his life. And so the evil girlfriend says, "Give me her heart," yes? And he carves it out, and he's carrying it to this wicked Lilith, this demoness, this daughter-in-law. And he trips and falls, and the heart says, "Son, are you hurt?" You remember this story? Everyone knows it. Yeah? And at first it sounds like he's just reading it to practice his Armenian or something. And then there's a shot of Arsina, and then she looks daggers at Rafi's half-sister, girlfriend, and so on. And things get very intricately interwoven into each other at once. But right throughout the film, the idea is that one of the things, to me it seems, one of the things one has to wrest out of the horror and the loss is the ability to love again. And by painting the hands and painting them over as well, Arshil Gorky is expressing both the destruction and the despair, and also the sheer will to create art that can save us or heal us, to talk about horror and love, and how love has to triumph somehow. How, even though it seems impossible, when Rafi finally embraces his sister at the very end, I see the final, the final part of a triptych, or maybe something larger than a triptych, in which that hope seems to be restored. So this is how I saw the image of the hands with the button, and the button survives and saved.
I love your response and that analysis, and that really is the spot. I just wanted to build on that. That scene was a gift. That scene where she's sewing that button back on, it's a gift. It's like the restoration of order. It's a place for our peace. It's like the rest in peace for our pain.
Lara.
It's like the rest in peace for our pain. I don't think this microphone is honestly amplifying. I think it's the rest in peace for our pain, and more than that, I agree with everything internal to that, every internal analysis of that Professor Russell just offered so insightfully. But more than that, I just have to share that was the gift, that was the movie's gift to me. That we got to return to that scene of pastoral peacetime, where before there was any genocide, where the priests walk with the people, and the friends are together, and the mother is singing with our instruments and our village. It was a gift to me because I needed that picture of the village. That means more to me than anything. I remember when I visited Professor Russell once in his office, and I told him that one of my mother's Eintopsy, and he mentioned a story about Eintop that involved him riding the metro in what is now Antep, I think, or something. I caught wind.
It's not that big.
Okay.
Even now, Antep isn't that big.
Okay. But
Yes.
the point being that I caught wind of the fact that there's a subway system in Eintop. This was
There
very
are.
disturbing to me, as minimal as it might be, because every image of Eintop I've ever had involves someone in the background churning butter or monsoon or something. That is the image that I've always dreamed but never really had. I never had the picture. We never had the picture. My generation especially doesn't have the colors of that landscape, the colors of that building, the way the wood hits the sunlight, all of those things, that image. And having a mother there, and having that scene put together, and that button sewed back on, that button that he took with him to the new world, that was the pain, that was the missing piece when that picture was taken, that he had to cover up with his hand, and with those flowers, that gesture of offering, like those flowers covering up that missing button, that button would be put back on in that scene, where I got, for me, forever, that picture of a village that I can now carry with me everywhere. That was the gift that Ararat gave me, so that's what that was.
Next question.
Actually, I just want to make a comment that my hope is that these movies serve two purposes. One is that it would enlighten the non-Armenian community about the genocide, the forgotten Armenian genocide. hear you talk, Lara, as a young woman, about the sense of responsibility that the Armenians should feel after they see the movie. We know so much about the genocide, but I think you walk away from this movie, all I could say was just one sentence in my mind was, these people cannot be forgotten. We're talking about memory, we're talking about denial, but I think this movie is about remembering people who existed, remembering the land that was full of life, the life that you're talking about. The saddest part for me in this movie was not the violence, the rape scenes, it was the barren land, bond with nothing in it, with no people, with very few monuments. And I think if we forget that there was life there were structures there, we are going to forget the history. So I'm very glad that as a young woman, you're talking about a sense of responsibility. Because most people who come to NAASR, most people who come to Armenian functions belong to the older generation, and I always worry when I go to talks in terms of who is going to carry the torch. So it's nice that you're here, and it's nice to see a huge crowd like this. And I do want to also thank Harvey Weinstein for really putting the money to make this movie. We cannot be ungrateful for that. Miramax can do more, but we should really appreciate and really give the respect when it's due. Without his effort,
My name is Critic. I've been following with the write-ups about this movie for quite a few weeks before it premiered. I just want to say that we could talk about the do's and don'ts until eternity, and we're not going to get anywhere. Right now, the movie is out. This is the first professional production movie on the screen. And instead of this, that, and the other, it could have been this way and that way. I think if each one of us here took 10 of our friends to the theater, that's going to mean dollar. And today's world is based on money. Nobody cares about someone's death unless they are valued in dollar amounts. If we're going to win this project, if we're going to get some sort of a reimbursement to our dignity, we're going to have to put our money where our mouth is. And that's the only way we get. I mean, we spend too much effort about massacre, genocide. Who cares? People die. Whether it's a genocide or a massacre, we're spending thousands of dollars to change terminology. We could take those thousands of dollars and print pamphlets and hand out to people who don't know about it. Who cares if such and such government accepts it as genocide or not? Our perspective and our goal should be to let people know what happened. And that's all.
Instead of handing out pamphlets, we can also hand out tickets. The origin of our
Yes,
project
yes.
I was having dinner with a group of Armenian adults, and one of them caught wind, Stoyan, who's from Boston, caught wind of the fact that we were trying to subsidize tickets for non-Armenians so that they would come see it, and he just offered to give us the tickets. And he gave them to us, and we got them out, and people saw the movie. And I have to share with you that they loved it, they felt it, they emailed me afterwards telling me, administrators, Harvard professors, Harvard students, that they want to learn more about it, that they're going to learn more about it, and that one of them wrote me back the most beautiful quotation from Arsha Gorky that she went online and found, which was something along the lines of, the eyes of the Armenian speak long before his mouth moves, and long after it ceases to. That person now understands Armenians, not just the genocide. The genocide is an afterthought. They hear the music. One of my Jewish friends gave me and his family the Ararat soundtrack as a present on the first night of Hanukkah. And, I mean, they all love it. They get to share this. They get to understand this now. That's something we have to help them realize.
I absolutely agree. I think we need to diversify our plans. We're focusing too much on terminology. So
Yeah, but I disagree with you, sir. Massacre and genocide are two different things, and when this gentleman made his review, he said the word genocide, it should be kept the way it is. There's a big
Okay, it's a point of argument. We'll have to
I just want
leave
to
it as
thank
such.
everybody that was involved. I thought it was a great movie. There was not a hint of confusion. I have a short attention span, but for the duration of the movie, not once was I disconnected. I thought it flowed like water. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
I want to pick up on that question and make it into a question so that we can actually answer it. And I want to direct it to Paul and Lara specifically and maybe Wesley as well. It seems to me that this movie is going to disappear in about 3 weeks unless something is done. And I think Lara has started an initiative and started by bringing Harvard students. We have to figure out practically, not writing to Miramax, calling millions of people, trying to get publicity, whatever. We need to come up with something concrete, grassroots, that we can do, not with anybody else's help, but with our own effort. What is that? And how can we go and buy out the West Newton Theater, buy all the tickets, give them out to everybody we want to have see it? What are we going to do? And how do we mobilize this group here, whatever other groups there are, how do we get it done?
Free Lemogen with every ticket.
Is there an answer?
It's a good question. Does anyone have any ideas?
I'd like to say something about that opposite thing of what the last two people were saying about grassroots, word of mouth, buying tickets and all that. I was looking forward to this movie for 1 year, and I was very disappointed because it's not a commercial movie. It was not advertised, and I was wondering if this movie was advertised in Canada, where Egoyan is, I understand from what I read, is very famous, and he was nominated. The movie was nominated for some Genie Award in Toronto. I don't know what that's equivalent to in the U.S.
Oscars.
So the problem I see is this movie should have been advertised. The Miramax movie, and why was it not advertised? And as far as all the perceptions that the panel had for this question was, one of them was Armenians are not, comparing the Armenians to the Jews, Armenians are not spread all over the world, and I totally disagree with that. The Armenians are everywhere in the places you would not even imagine, and we need to, the problem is, I could go on forever.
Well, let's let anyone respond.
Well, let me start this way. Worldwide box office and distribution of any film really depends on its theatrical run in the United States. Everything feeds from that. The purchase price that distributors have to pay internationally oftentimes has to do with the box office of a theatrical run in the United States. Now, what I try to do, what other people have tried to do around the United States, is not depend on Miramax for advertising, because actually their advertising support has not been bad in the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times, for example, even in the Boston Globe. It's a very compelling poster ad.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I should have been more specific. What I mean advertising is commercial. Commercial movie is shown on television preview as a commercial. I did not see that.
Those are the most expensive spots that you can buy. A 30-second spot, for example, could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars on a prime time show.
Can I add something? You've got sort of a chicken-egg thing. You've got take a movie like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which you alluded to earlier. How does a movie like that, which got no push, nothing, build slowly to the point where next thing you know, everyone has seen it 3 times?
That's right.
Yeah, but it has to get seen first.
I've seen many
Okay. Okay, we'll let the panelists respond to one of these questions.
I think I actually touched on this a little while ago. Yeah. And I tried to tell you that it's a very competitive marketplace. And I think that we should not be so hard on Miramax, but instead take that energy and do something a little more constructive with it. It is not a hugely commercial film. It is an unwieldy film. It is our film. We have all of this passion and love and emotion, and we're pinning it on one film. This is a very momentous occasion. This is a breakthrough period. This is the first, and I hope, a line of many films, many stories. I think that we just have to, we need to frame it a little bit differently for ourselves. When I was personally touched when Professor Russell said those encouraging words to Egoyan. How many Armenian parents or grandparents say those encouraging words to their children when they are aspiring to do something artistic and risky and non-commercial in life? It is our job, it is this group's job to encourage and foster that in our children, in our people, so that we can continue and we can have a Joy Luck Club, we can have a Schindler's List, we can have Holocaust, a mini-series. This is just the beginning. But back to what the young woman's problem is, we need to create, as I said, a groundswell. If we create that in the marketplace, then Miramax will readdress this issue. So, spread this word, that's email, that's calls, that's taking buses of people to different cities and going and seeing. Make these next 2 weeks as important as possible, because if it starts to wane, if that $7,000 a week, box office gross goes down to 4, 3, or 2, it will in fact disappear. So it's our job now. Miramax does what they do. Now we need to do what we do. That's right.
I want to challenge us. I mean, we're being challenged here, and I want us to walk away with this idea that we are challenged tonight with finding a strategy on how we're going to get this movie playing for a long time and get a lot of people seeing it. Education, the educational sphere is one way. You want to trust us to give tickets to students. College students go to this movie, we give them a free ticket, and they leave and they thank us. They say, thank you for this ticket. Thank you for showing us Ararat. It's not just that. It's taking your kids, offering free tickets to the teachers at your kids' 4th grade level or whatever it is. It's, making this an offering and extending it to them instead of necessarily hoping that they'll come to us.
Small things. I think we're talking about many different things. And equally, we can operate on many different levels. I think what Lara is doing is fantastic and has to be encouraged. It's a great idea to let Armenian kids just, in general, choose their own professions. There are a great many dentists already. And, that's fine too. And it's fine to have a grassroots movement. But let's acknowledge something. There's also problems from the top down. There's a kind of a wall we can't break through. Somebody without a name at the globe does this with the word genocide. Somehow, the film, okay, it's not a big draw, but somehow it just isn't getting the kind of distribution that one hoped for. You have to buy tickets, look at it. But there has to be multifaceted activity. And I was thinking, this isn't a time in history when the U.S. State Department is suddenly going to change and say, hey, Ararat is a great film, everyone should see it, even if it really disturbs the Turks. It's pretty obvious that somewhere in Washington, someone is saying, it's a very nice art film. Calendar was a very nice art film, too. Egoyan said, this was a great film. I was very disappointed that in the United States, it was hardly ever made available anywhere. I wonder why. I said, what do you mean you wonder why? It's nothing but Armenian churches. Once there's an Armenian church there, someone in Washington is going to say, let's go easy on this because the Turks will be upset. We let Yemen have 15 Scud missiles, yesterday. So, it's okay, they bought them. If we're going to lean over backwards to be nice to Yemen, and Turkey is this giant NATO partner, what do? obviously all the things we're doing, but there's one other thing I want to suggest. There is a country which is different from this, which is powerful, which does recognize the Armenian Genocide, which is France. In that respect, France is still free. We have to do everything we can as the Armenian Americans to encourage the French Armenians to make sure that this gets maximum distribution in Europe, where there will not be any suppression from up above. So it's very important those of us who have contacts with France see that it gets seen in Europe the way it's not getting seen here.
We have two more patient questioners, so.
Okay, I want to just ask two things, maybe you can comment on both or neither. First, you mentioned the most powerful scene being, in your opinion, Professor Russell, the picture about the hands being removed, etc. I thought the second most powerful scene, at least to me, and one that kind of he just hung out there and didn't really do anything with, is when Sharon said that what obsessed him was how could people hate us so much. And just the psychology of hatred, as much as raising it as a subject makes you feel evil or seem evil because you should leave that subject alone, is perhaps far less explored than the psychology of love. I mean, love's pretty easy to understand. Hatred is very difficult to understand and shunned as something to write about. So I thought you could comment on that. The second thing, just observation I would make, just again, I can formulate this as a question and take all night and I'll repeat myself, so I won't do that. The second thing, just observationally, is the way the film's been reviewed. Because the reviews, there are some websites where you can get them all. And you find a lot of mixed reviews, a few good, a few positive, a few negative. And when you read them, you see that people kind of start debating about what was nice, what wasn't, etc. And the parallel between that and how historians have been debating about whether this really happened or not is remarkable. As though Adam intended the after effects to just draw a parallel between this debate about, well, did he really mean this, did he mean that? But of course, one is about art, artifact, the other is about reality. And I just wonder, since we have a film reviewer and a historian, whether you could see that parallel and how it is that historians grapple with the interpretation that art reviewers are, of course, encouraged to do, but historians aren't supposed to do. So, two questions.
That's a really good question. Well, I think I think in your question is the inherent question of what the function of art is. And I don't really, and there have been numerous questions analogous to that about what the function of history is and how history is used. But, I think that there's a certain level of, I think art is sort of a sponge for everything else. And I think that in art, you sort of, it's something that's created, it's a construction, and you take these elements, history, life, script, whatever, to create this experience, this work. Or, I don't know, I think that history is it's sort of there to be reckoned with, I think, in a different fashion. In terms of, it's not so much being a product that one creates. And I think art sort of subsumes that in a different way than history subsumes art.
Yeah. Some of this I just can't comment on because I have to think about it some more. So let me just talk about hatred, since you mentioned it. It seemed to me that Egoyan addressed the problem of the visceral hatred that a lot of Ottoman society felt towards the Armenians in that really terrifying scene and where the Turkish officer played by Ali goes into the photographer's shop. And just as, I forget what I think Van Arroyan asked about the button. Yeah? Did you notice how